So we started off our morning on quite the tangent because did you happen to see the athletic quarterback tier ranking that came out just a couple of days ago?
I did. I did not go through it, but I saw obviously some of the notable rankings.
So essentially, Dylan Raiola, number 40. Do you think that there are 39 quarterbacks that are better in college football than Dylan Raiola coming into this season?
I don't think so. I do. I think when you go back and look like over the tiers we did a couple months ago, a couple weeks ago at this point, those tiers we did, I do think like that second and third tier specifically gets a little deeper than you think, where it's like, okay, I mean, you could if you are an outsider with a whole lot, like the only reference you have to Dylan Raiola is his freshman year, and you're not at all exposed to the high school tape. You're not at all exposed to, okay, here's the player profile and what the upside is. I could, again, on paper see it. I think it's a little, I think it's one of those things where it's a little bearish considering where we might be talking about Dylan even at midseason this fall.
So Tim, kind of in that sense, right? So I appreciate you trying to give people benefit of the doubt here. I do. But we made a lot of assumptions with other people that we know even less about on that list than Dylan Raiola, right? We're making assumptions like we're going off of 90 passes from Arch Manning and saying that's a big enough sample size to put him at 10. Now, I get the circumstances around him are ideal. So maybe I give that one a little bit of a pass. But then we go to like an Austin Simmons who like haven't really seen play football yet. And we go down to, like Mark Gronowski.
The one that's egregious for me is Jackson Arnold.
Yes. Egregious. I think you're fairly high on Dante Moore, but I look at Dante Moore and I go, okay, we don't know any more about Dante Moore than we do about Dylan. They both had 1 year of mostly starting experience. Dante took a year off basically. So I don't know if the gap year helped him, but people were not in love with Dante Moore last year. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, he sat for a year. So he's great. There's a bunch of guys like that.
Yeah. And you could also make the argument going into, again, if you're evaluating the whole picture with Evan Stewart out, you could make the argument Dylan has more experienced weapons than Dante Moore, because Dante Moore is going to have to rely on DeCorian Moore, who I do really like a lot and was an electric player out of Duncanville, but that's a true freshman who, again, we've seen true freshmen have instant impacts, but you're asking that guy to be wide receiver one, and that doesn't compute for me, especially when it's like, oh yeah, I mean, Dylan has Dane Key as wide receiver one, Isaiah Hunter and Ja'Cory Barney in the room. And then, you've got Cortez Mills and Isaiah Mosey and all these different guys coming off the bench. I think when you evaluate the whole picture, I think Dylan being where he's at is hard for me to understand. And again, it's one of those things that's really silly considering where we may be talking about him 4 or 5 weeks into the season.
And I really don't understand, and we don't have to stay on this anymore very much longer, but I'm sitting here, I'm going Eli Holstein, Gio Lopez. We're talking this. Gio Lopez played at South Alabama last year, and his numbers were decent. They were okay. It wasn't like Cam Ward numbers or anything at Incarnate Word. I don't know what we're talking about.
But I still think my biggest argument is when you compare Dylan to other quarterbacks and you are taking those quarterbacks, potentially like Arch, that have the better everything around them, the roster, the defense, the coaching, everything. And I'm not saying obviously comparative to what I think Nebraska has in the positive sense, but if you put Dylan at Ohio State, Julian Sayan's not going to be rated number 40 with Nebraska. He's going to be far lower on that list, but Dylan would be much higher than 40 at Ohio State. That's kind of where the crux of, I think, most of this argument comes from.
Right. And I don't know. I just feel in general at a national level, Nebraska's offseason and Nebraska in general has kind of slipped under the national radar. And I don't really know why, because there was a lot of hype going into last year. But you understanding the situation, the hype should be for a year 3 Rhule. The hype should be for a Dylan Raiola and Dana Holgorsen offense. The hype should be around, okay, here's who they got this offseason. There should be a little more there. I don't really know exactly why. I think part of it is how competitive the Big Ten is expected to be this year, where it's like, okay, yeah, I mean, Nebraska may be better this year, but just how much better is it going to be? Like, I mean, there's a world. I think I saw a mock like standings for the Big Ten, and it's like, yeah, Nebraska goes 8-4 or even 9-4, but finishes like 7th or 8th or 6th or 7th, somewhere in the 6 to 8 tier in the Big Ten, which like is possible, but and I think that would be a successful year, but like I don't think that's something where, considering Nebraska's schedule, like I don't think Nebraska gets to that point where they are like 8-9 wins, and you're also looking at, oh yeah, Dylan Raiola was also just the 40th best quarterback in the country.
Tim, is that almost strategic on Nebraska's side? It feels like they themselves have had a quieter offseason. We don't see the documentaries that are coming out from the program. Matt Rhule has still done some of the national conversation, and of course we'll hear Big Ten Media Days next week, but it doesn't feel like Nebraska themselves have been puffing out their chests as much as we saw last year. So is it almost maybe beneficiary that they can sneak up on some people from the national conversation this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is intentional a little bit, but also like I'm curious to see how they approach Big Ten Media Days. I think this is kind of like when things start rolling, and we all know, being around here and listening to the way Coach Rhule and some of the guys on the team talk, and again just the way like through all of us, just like what the where the confidence is at behind the scenes. Um, I mean, this is a confident team, and this is a team that knows that they're better than they are last year. But I do think the decision, and part of it, I think, in my opinion, comes from some of the new staff additions, kind of this new vision for what this program wants to be. Like, I don't think I think part of it is like, hey, Dana Holgerson maybe doesn't want like a whole lot of eyeballs on this offense and a whole lot of hype around this offense, but they're going to be good, or should be good on paper, and it's like John Butler's pretty unproven. Like, it's been a decade since he's coached or led a defense. Like, yeah, those things go into it, and I think part of it is calculated. But again, I just think, yeah, at a national level, I think Nebraska probably deserves to be talked about a little more. I mean, we're starting to see it a little bit. People are like, wait a minute, like we're talking about DJ Lagway this much. Why aren't we talking about Dylan Raiola this much? And it's like, listen, I love DJ. I'm a big DJ guy. Like, but I get it. I mean, there's part of it's the SEC stuff because, and again, sorry for the tangent, but Lagway is kind of in Florida is in the same boat kind of as Nebraska in the sense that, yeah, they could be better than last year and still finish like middle of the pack, if not lower in the SEC. Like they could still go like 8-4, 9-3. Like that's still very much on the table. But yeah, he gets the hype that like I don't think that Dylan necessarily gets, and I'm not really sure for the reason why.
And I think what a lot of people point to, Tim, because this has been a big pet peeve of mine, as you know, especially between DJ and Dylan, I think what a lot of people point to is the talent and the upside, right? But you can tell me this better than anybody. Like DJ and Dylan were essentially viewed as the same level of recruit. I mean, they were literally 1-2 in whatever order, right, of quarterbacks coming out of high school in that class. And their numbers are very similar from last year, even though DJ didn't play the whole season. Like, I don't understand. That's where I don't get it, right? It's not like Dylan was the 150th recruit in the country or some 3-star that just popped off and you're like, oh, that's interesting. Like, he's not Keaton Slovis a few years back at USC where you're like, oh, that came out of nowhere. That's wild. As a true freshman, this guy was viewed every bit as the prospect as DJ Lagway, but now it seems like people are like, oh, Lagway is the hyper talented one and we'll just see what happens with Dylan. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, you would think over the years people would learn, like just at the general, like the college football and drafts type, like the general audience. I know there's obviously very good people in all of those audiences, very smart people, but you think the general audience at this point would be a little past the like, oh, we're solely just consumed by the physical tools and not the quarterbackiness of it all. Like, DJ is a really good quarterback. Like, don't get me wrong. There's a lot in his arsenal. I think he's a really physically gifted athlete on top of that. And like he can make all the throws in the same way that Dylan can. Where I think people underestimate Dylan and are kind of like banking on it coming together for DJ is the processing. That's something that Dylan was really good at as a freshman and came into college really good at. that's something that DJ himself admitted this last week. He's still figuring out. He's still figuring out how to see the field at the SEC level. I thought Dylan did a really good job of processing, especially early on in the year. And yeah, you saw some bumps and bruises across the year, and some setbacks there to that area of his game. But that's something that at the bare minimum you're getting. And so I think that's something that long term we're gonna have recruiting blitz on Monday out with Cody Belair, a national scout here at Rivals. And we have a long discussion about processing for quarterbacks and what that means and why it's such an important skill. And in my opinion, it's been a discussion online too. It's an underrated skill when we're talking about projecting to the league. The best quarterbacks in the league process at a high level. Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, even, and Lamar doesn't get the credit for it. Lamar processes at a really high level, does a really good job of setting his feet and balancing his feet and going through his reads. That's something that DJ's still figuring out, but Dylan already has. And on top of that, Dylan has, the arm talent to kind of get balls to all three levels of the field. Yeah, the physical upside maybe isn't there like DJ. He's never going to be the runner that DJ is. But we've seen in the NFL and in college football, you don't need that necessarily to be successful. You just need to be able to move around a little bit. And I think Dylan's going to be able to do enough where, yeah, down the line, if both of these guys hit at the way we think they can over these next 2 to 3 years, yeah, I mean, we're still talking about them as 1 and 2 type guys in a draft ranking like we did coming out of high school.
Yeah, Tim, it's funny because as you're talking through that, and then you mentioned the processing, right? So if you want to know the difference, if people don't really understand how big of an impact that makes, take a guy who's very physically mediocre in Brock Purdy and a guy who's very physically talented in Anthony Richardson, and that's the value of processing, right? It's $53 million a year. That's the value of processing, and Anthony Richardson is going to get beat out for a job by Daniel Jones. So I think that's the thing that I have a hard time with is okay, listen, the physical tools are great. And I think DJ's better than Anthony Richardson as a quarterback already. But if he admittedly is having a hard time processing, and that's a thing we know Dylan does well, I don't even know why this is a discussion. That there are 35 spots in between. Sorry, just a little tangent there for me. But the other thing that I wanted to ask you about is, okay, so Brendan Sorsby is 20 on this list. Dylan Raiola is 40. If this is a thing that existed and Nebraska called Cincinnati and said, hey, we'll trade you Dylan for Brendan straight up, how fast does Cincinnati say yes?
It's so fast. Yeah,
Luka trade quick.
Yeah, like Luka to the Lakers quick. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. Just whatever you want.
Yeah.
And
I mean, Nebraska would hypothetically, if that was a trade, Nebraska would hypothetically get a couple of very good players back in return as well. It wouldn't just be a straight up 1-for-1.
You need 4 future firsts in that situation, right? And how fast, if Cincinnati makes that phone call, does Nebraska hang up?
Yeah, pretty much immediate. That's the thing. I think, again, this is the list, but you ask anybody, and yeah, people can maybe dismiss it as oh, it's just internal hype, or it's maybe a little, it's just yeah, of course they're going to be hiring their guy. Man, if you ask anybody around Nebraska right now on the offensive side of the ball, there's not a lot of people in college football right now they would trade Dylan Raiola for. There's not a whole lot of quarterbacks out there. I don't think there's any. I think they're pretty set with their guy. I think they're pretty confident because, yeah, on top of the physical tools for Nebraska specifically, you need a quarterback that's all in. You need a quarterback that's all in, that's the vocal leader, that's doing all these things, that's off the field. I've heard behind the scenes, and I'm not going to name names, but I've heard behind the scenes there are a couple quarterbacks out there that aren't necessarily the guy right now. The hope was after, a strong last year or flashes last year, they were going to take a step forward this year and be the guy. And that just hasn't really happened. And what it's led to is a internal conversation at some of these programs where they're oh man, by midseason, are we going to be starting a different guy? Is this just not going to be our QB1? by the time we get to like the tough midseason slate. And again, to iterate that, to just be clarified, that's not Lagway at all. Like Lagway is the guy, like in the same way that Dylan is the guy at Nebraska, Lagway is the guy at Florida. They all fall in line behind Lagway, just like they all fall in line behind Raiola here at Nebraska. But there are a few other quarterbacks out there that I have heard that aren't necessarily performing up to the level that people thought they'd be performing to. And it has caused a conversation.